Yeah, because I mean, as a teenager, as a kid, or as a college athlete, even you're not necessarily focused on like your performance. Like you are, but you aren't. Like you're focused on the end result, but at the same time, you're not necessarily focusing on how you're feeling and how you're functioning. And so when you really start looking at it, or you start having other people look at it for you, like with my parents, um, they would notice that when my blood sugar was really good, man, I wrestled at a pretty high level. When my blood sugar was really high, it was like a whole different person. My dad's like, it literally looks like you're out there in cement, like you're just in slow motion. And because I mean, I'd wrestle these guys that literally I had pinned the week before,
Mm-hmm.
and then this week I lost to him, and I'm like, how is this even possible? Like, sometimes that happens because you catch somebody and they really
Right.
are decently good, but you just
Yeah.
caught them.
Right.
But then it wasn't that way. Like I dominated the whole match, pinned him, and like this kid is just not good. And then the next week he comes in and beats me, and it's like a close, quote unquote good match. And so after that match, I'm like, this is like what happened? Like I'm so
Mm-hmm.
frustrated. And then my dad would tell me, you just look like you're in slow motion. So then we check my blood sugar, and it's like, well above 200. And we're like, oh, so we started noticing that trend. And
That's really awesome that your parents had that insight. Because actually, when you told me that story for the first time, I got pissed. I got fucking pissed. And yeah, I'm gonna swear on it since it's a little more off the hinges. Um, but just because I never thought about it, I never thought about my blood sugar affecting me that way, and I wasn't the best wrestler by any means. I was captain, I was varsity for a couple years, got lettered and all that, but the thought of now, as the glory days are kicking in and thinking about what could have happened. Oh, just like people like, oh, I could have made it into the league if I didn't
yeah.
sprain that ankle. And when I was a junior in high school for football. um, so kind of in the same thought process, it was just like, man, how much more could I have done better if I even realized that my blood sugar affects performance?
Mhm.
And that's just like, once when you told me those, started telling me some of these stories, I was just like, that's insane. Like, did you ever have a rival? Did you have a rival that happened with?
Yeah, well, nah, I can't say a rival because, like I
No.
said, for the most part, you really notice it with like the kids that shouldn't stand a chance, but then they
Mhm.
do. But it's happened a couple times with like people who I wrestled multiple times. And so like the first time I wrestled them, I'm thinking of one kid specifically. I, pinned him in like the first period. Then the next time we wrestle, I like it's a close match. I still win, but it's a close match. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And then, we wrestle more and more. And then I remember specifically this one match that it was like the only tournament that my dad had missed because he had gout really bad and literally could not get out of bed.
Mm.
And um, I wrestled this kid, just not a good wrestler, and he beats me, and I'm just so frustrated. I go up and check my blood sugar, and it's like 280. Like I can still picture. I believe it was 286. I can still picture it in my head because it just burned into me.
Mm.
And I'm like, I mean, not to use. It's hard. It's like you don't want to use that as an excuse, but at
Oh,
the same
sure.
time, it's like, man, that it has a big effect.
It's almost like the reverse, like how I think about it, like, oh, what could have been. You're thinking
Yeah.
about like, oh man, like where I literally have this unknown potential in my mind of the past. Like, man, I could only go skies like better. Because if I'm wrestling sluggish all the time, my blood sugar was awful during wrestling.
Yeah.
And if it was awful all the time, the thought is in my mind, wow, it could have been so much better.
Yeah.
But for you, and like it's almost an exciting and frustrating thought. But when you're thinking about it, it's almost literally this frustrating thing of am I making an excuse because I didn't do well because of my athletic performance, or did I not do well because of my blood sugar?
Yeah. Yeah, there's always going to be that question mark. It's like, especially when you have people notice the change. So it's like a noticeable enough change that happens with the high blood sugar. And so it's like, well, if it's that noticeable, it's like it has to be a pretty big factor then. And so then it becomes sort of a mind game after the fact, being like, okay, was it the fact that I just didn't show up today and didn't wrestle well,
You
or
sucked.
yeah, was it because I sucked today,
Mm-hmm.
or is it because I my blood sugar was high and I could have done better if I would have just controlled that, and could have been things could have been a lot different. And then like when I hear you talk about your control, it also makes me think about just like even within practice, like how much better could you have done because you were able to practice better, push yourself harder, all those things.
Yep.
Because when your blood sugar is high, you're just not going to perform well, whether it's just because of you you're in sand or you're moving slow, but at the same time how hard you're able to push yourself. And yeah, so I there's a lot of stuff to think about.